The current global shortfall of energy supply is among the most severe that the globe has ever experienced since the beginning of the modern time. Because supply and demand aren't in balance, prices are going through the roof and putting many major economies on the edge of disaster. After Russia attacked Ukraine, the West put a number of sanctions on Russian exports. These sanctions have made natural gas supplies in the US and Europe shrink. But while Western countries have trouble getting enough energy and people are living in energy poverty, the Kremlin and Beijing keep making money off of record high prices. In fact, a new report shows that China is aggressively reselling Russian liquefied natural gas to energy-poor countries in Europe and all over the world. By doing this, China is getting around sanctions and helping to drive up prices in some places by as much as 700%. There is now a rush for energy, and the shock to the supply is likely to get worse from here on out. In today's video, we're going to show you how to do it. Before we begin, if you haven't subscribed yet, please subscribe to our channel and hit the bell icon to get notified of our new videos. Now, China is going through a historic economic slowdown, which is leaving the country with more natural gas than it needs because factory production keeps going down. According to a new Nikkei article that cites data from research firm Kepler, Beijing is now selling its extra supplies to European countries that have been dealing with severe shortages and rising prices. The report says that Europe's imports of liquefied natural gas went up 60% from the first half of 2021 to the first half of 2022. This was due to shipments from China. Since the first quarter, China's economy has been losing steam because of its strict zero-tolerance health policies and the collapse of its huge property market. Economists think that the government's goal of 5.5% growth is unlikely to be reached. Due to the economic downturn, some Chinese companies have unusually large natural gas reserves, which they have been able to sell to countries that are in the middle of an energy crisis. According to Nikkei estimates, more than 4 million tons of Chinese LNG have likely been resold, accounting for around 7% of Europe's imports in the first half of the year. According to local media, Sinopec, China's state-owned energy conglomerate, has sold 45 cargoes of gas on the international market so far this year. Meanwhile, Russia has already made $24 billion from selling energy to China and India in the 3 months since the Ukraine conflict erupted. This demonstrates how increased global prices are constraining US and European efforts to penalize President Vladimir Putin. Nikkei emphasizes that the bans have driven up prices for alternative supplies and fueled debilitating inflation, threatening to bring key economic superpowers to their knees. China has spent $18.9 billion on Russian oil, gas, and coal in the last 3 months alone. According to the most recent customs data, China's imports of Russian natural gas nearly doubled compared to the same period last year. Meanwhile, India spent $5.1 billion on Russian natural gas during the same period, more than 5 times the amount paid the previous year. This means that both countries will earn an extra $13 billion compared to the same months in 2021. Lori Marley, the theater lead analyst at the Center for Research on Energy and Clean Air, said that China already buys almost everything that Russia can export through pipelines and ports in the Pacific. India has been the biggest buyer of goods from the Atlantic that Europe no longer wants. Even though Europe still doesn't want to buy Russian energy, Sinopec data shows that China has been reselling Russian shipments of liquefied natural gas to European countries. SCMP analysts found that China's imports of natural gas rose by 28.7% in the first half of the year, while the value of those imports jumped by 182%. On top of that, Gazprom just said that the amount of Russian pipeline gas going to China in the first half of 2022 went up by 63.4%. During this time, the company has significantly reduced the amount of product it ships to markets in Germany, which has resulted in rationing and considerable economic instability. In essence, it means that Russia has passed Indonesia and the US to become the country's 4th largest energy supplier so far this year. Analysts say that the huge increase in Russian liquefied natural gas imports from China, even though domestic demand has dropped, is a way to get around Western sanctions so that Beijing and the Kremlin can continue to make money off of skyrocketing energy prices. Zero-hedge experts pointed out yesterday that China has been quietly reselling Russian LNG to Europe, which means that more than anywhere else, and of course, it is charging a lot more for it. According to a recent article in the Financial Times, Europe's worries about gas shortages this winter may have been put to rest by an unexpected hero, China. Publications owned by Nikkei say that the biggest buyer of liquefied natural gas in the world is selling some of its extra shipments because energy demand at home is low. This has made sure that there is a lot of spark on the market, which Europe has taken advantage of despite the higher prices. But the experts say that the report doesn't take into account the fact that it's not really a surplus. If Chinese imports of Russian LNG had gone down instead of up, they said the right word to use to describe the LNG that China sells to Europe is Russian. They gave some more details to show that this is true. Zero Hedge said that China's 𝐥𝐤𝐤 Group, which is a big LNG trader, recently said that it had resold an LNG cargo to a buyer in Europe. A futures trader in Shanghai said that the profit from such a deal could be in the tens of millions of dollars or even reach $100 million. At the same time, China's largest oil refiner, Sinopec Group, admitted on an earnings call in April that it had been sending excess LNG to the international market. Don't get it wrong. All of these extra sources of energy came, in whole or in part, from Russia. But it is no longer Russian because it has been told in China. Instead, it is being called Chinese LNG. They pointed out the main problem, which is that as soon as China's economy starts to grow again, the situation will quickly change, and Beijing won't be able to keep Europe warm this winter by reselling Russian gas. This also means that instead of getting its energy from Russia, Europe is now getting its natural gas from China. Even though the gas comes from Russia, it is now coming from China. Analysts wrote that this makes a joke out of Western plans to defend a liberal international order with its own energy exports. At the end of the day, what the West has done is make energy more expensive and scarce for itself, while remaining mostly dependent on the exports of the country it now wants to ban. Even worse, Europe could buy these supplies for less than half of what it is paying now. Instead, it has to pay 6 to 7 times more just to show the rest of the world that it won't fund Putin's government, even though it's really paying more to both China and Russia, which are getting a higher price because there aren't enough of the goods on the market. In an ironic twist, the FT doesn't come right out and say it, but it does imply that Europe is buying Russian LNG through China. It said, if Russia ends up sending more gas to China as a way to punish Europe, China will be able to sell more of its extra gas on the spot market, which will help Europe in a roundabout way. But that doesn't really show what everyone already knows. China is helping Russia get around sanctions. In fact, both countries are getting very rich from the trade. The more desperate Europe is about getting enough energy, the more China's policies will be able to affect the bloc. Europe is trying to get less energy from Russia, but ironically, it is becoming more dependent on China. Zero Hedge pointed out that in the end, all the Western countries were able to do was switch from one energy master to another. Before the conflict started in February, Russia provided about 8% of the world's oil trade, 25% of its gas exports, 18% of its thermal coal exports, and 9% of its metallurgical coal exports. Russia still sells oil, gas, and coal to markets around the world. But a Finnish think tank found that exports of fossil fuels have dropped by 22% since their peak in March, and sales of gas through pipelines have dropped by 50%. But because investment has been going down for 8 years, the last Russian volume can't be easily replaced. Between 2014 and 2016, low oil prices caused investments to drop by 45%. From 2020 on, the health crisis caused another 30% drop in investments. It's no wonder that European leaders are in a hurry to fill up gas storage so that there will be enough gas to heat homes and power factories during the northern winter. With natural gas, coal, and CO2 prices in Europe nearing all-time highs, there is a real danger of energy poverty, which could last for many years. Since the beginning of this year, electricity prices in Germany have gone up by a shocking 720%. Customers in the Western world, whether they are in industry, business, or retail, now have to deal with price increases that are many times what they paid in the past. In other words, our leaders' bad choices have made us still reliant on Russian energy exports. But now we have to pay a lot more for everything. This is a shock to the energy supply that is shaking up the whole West. The social, economic, and political systems of the US and Europe have never been so open to outside changes. And once again, it's us, the consumers, who have to deal with a wide range of terrible effects. That's all for today. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up. And if you want to hear more videos from our channel, subscribe and make sure to turn on the bell icon.